back! I am here today with a very interesting video that I would not have planned to make because I planned none of this. But I had a very interesting April. I was not on YouTube at all for April, and that was for a reason that I did not, as I said, plan at all. I did Camp NaNoWriMo. So for anyone who doesn't know, NaNoWriMo normally is in November and we'll do like 50,000 words, and you write 50,000 words ideally in November. And camp, you set your own goals. It goes throughout April, and you just try to write whatever it is that you say you're going to write. I wrote more. I wrote a lot more, which is obviously a good thing, but it was just the way it all happened that was very, very strange. And the point of what I'm saying in a very long form is that I finished a book. I didn't edit it, obviously. I don't mean I like finished a whole manuscript, but I completely drafted a fantasy book that is 100,000 words. And 80,000 of those words were written during Nano of the camp variety. So I was not planning on doing camp at all because I've been working on editing the book I drafted during Nano in November. But you know, things happen, and I needed just a creative outlet because I think sometimes when you're editing a book, it's just a different mindset from writing, and it gets a little bit draining for me anyway at times, and I needed something creative. And so I have all my friends on my writing Discord, and they were like, who's doing camp? And I was like, eh. And then March, I want to say 15th came around, it was something like that, and I had this really strange dream thought. It was like half asleep, half awake. It was a very mini part of a conversation, and I was like, I'll just write it down for next time I have time to write, you know, something new. And from that, from March like 15th or so until right before April, I drafted a whole outline, which is weird for me because in the past I've struggled to have more like cohesive outlines, but no, this one was, let me tell you, I will look it up. It was like a 7,000 word outline, which for me is a lot of words in an outline. I used to be more of a plantser, so I would have just like vague idea of what was happening, and you know, that's why I never finished a book before. I mean, I have, but it took a lot longer than this and a lot more trials and tribulations. I've never written something so quickly as I've written this book, and nothing has ever come to me as quickly as I have in this book. Ideally, it's going to be one of 3 books in a series, and I already kind of know what's happening for all of them. And it was like one of those weird experiences that I've never had before, where it all just came together so well and so quickly. And so I would still say that I'm a plantser to some degree because I don't like planning out every single scene. I'm not a huge scene card person. And if you don't know, scene cards are these things here. So you kind of have your main point of each chapter or scene, and you know how it starts, how it ends, those sorts of things. And I think that it's still important to look at scenes that way. So every scene that you're writing should have a purpose, even if it's a small one. Whether it's character progression, story progression, some sort of information that's being given but not info dumped. There should always be something that's happening in your scene and chapter that's moving your story along in some capacity. So if that helps you to write like that, more power to you. I just like the balance of having a fairly detailed outline without having everything put in there. Because I like that freedom when I'm writing to be able to come up with things. Like, there's one line of thought that strings through a lot of the chapters in my book that I would never in a million years have planned in an outline. It's so odd, but I like it a lot, and I just never would have thought about it if I was drafting my outline. So it's nice to have those sorts of spaces throughout your story outline to have freedom to write something and be able to use that as you're going. I'm on TikTok at scarlet_Ansley, and I'm going to be doing a lot of like outlining kind of tips. These are things that have worked for me that I don't know will work for you, but I will give you tips anyway because maybe it will. So here are 10 tips that I have that might help you in your writing, or might not, but it's worth a try. Number 1, in outlining, make the decision. And I know that sounds very vague, but what I mean by that is, let me use an example that my dad gave me when I was a kid. When I was younger, I would have a really hard time picking out outfits for the day. I was not good at coordinating them, but that doesn't really matter. I would just always struggle. I'm like, but what if I wear this thing? And that's not like, And basically his point was, it's one outfit of your life. You know, if you don't like it or whatever, just wear something else tomorrow. Sometimes you just have to make the decision, you know? You can't linger on it too long, otherwise you will never do it. So if you're in the outlining process and you're like, maybe I'll make the characters do this thing, I don't know, just do it. Especially if you're in the outlining process, what's the worst that happens is you get down towards a later point in time and you realize you backed yourself into a writing corner. Great, at least you haven't written the whole story and then you have to rewrite stuff. Then you can just go back and rework it because that's the best part of doing an outline. Or maybe you'll find out that it really does work. And this is going to loop in number 2, which is make bold choices. And this, I think, is not a surprise to a lot of people, but I feel like a lot of times people might be afraid of doing it. And this is when we get stories that seem kind of dull or where the characters don't have autonomy. It's like a subsection of this, but let your character, your protagonist, make choices that are bad. They don't have to be like evil, but just let them make mistakes, and then they have to face the consequences of those mistakes. And then it's a tumbling effect. That's sort of how the story goes, right? And those effects can have negative impacts on other people. So I'm going to be making a video soon about the Legendborn series. And an example from that, I won't go into, too much detail. But Bree, the main character of that, but she makes a decision in the second book, Bloodmarked, specifically, that I'm thinking of, and it ends up having a very negative impact on another character who she cares about. So you can have those sorts of moments where they've made decisions and maybe they don't have any malicious intent, but they're bad decisions that hurt other people or themselves or just impact the world. Like, make them have consequences, right? And like I said in my planning process, it's not a bad idea to just leave space for things to happen, but you want to plan for some of these things, right? You want to make sure that they're going to make hard choices and put them into these corners that they have to work themselves out of. So let them have those spaces to make those choices, be bold about it, and if you're in your outlining process and you're not sure, just do it. So that's numbers 1 and 2. 3 is also kind of similar, and it's something that I've been thinking about a lot since this book that I've just written is going to be part of a series. But if it's going to be part of a series, figure out what's going to happen, in the next 2 books. It doesn't have to be exact or every little thing, but I've seen this a lot and it makes me feel sad because you can almost sometimes tell when people don't know what's going to happen in their next books. But you'll get situations where the characters then make decisions in the later books that don't make sense, or you almost feel like it's retconning what happened in book 1, and there's just a lot that doesn't feel consistent because the author didn't know what was going to happen in these books. So maybe some of the motivations that you would see in book 1 don't really carry over in book 2, and you're trying to figure out why they would be doing this thing or how this new information that you get about a character plays into what decisions they made in book 1. So if you have this, you can kind of look at all of the characters and, if you're going to have secrets that are unraveled and new characters that are related in some way to these other characters, how all of them impact each other and how that kind of thinking is going to affect the way they act in book 1, because none of that's changed, right? If it's something like family members or friends or secrets that they've had them the whole time, assuming they're secrets that they've kept for a long time. They're still in that character underlining all of their actions, right? So we have to know what they are in order to implement them into their characterization in book 1. So it's just important to have those sorts of insights as you're going and to know where you're going to take the story, because sometimes you'll end up also seeing magic systems that get really crazy as they go because they've done so much in book 1. We end up Dragon Ball Z-ing it where everything ends up a new, more elevated power where it's this is the farthest I can go. Just kidding, we're gonna go Super Saiyan in 1 trillion. And so sometimes that's fun, and sometimes that just seems too much. You're okay, well now you're just way too OP, and then it doesn't really work. So it's just important to have those sorts of conversations with yourself as you're going, or see, we're linking this into number 4. Wow, look at that transition. Or when you're talking to partners, because that's what I would say is very important. thing to do, is to have writing partners, accountability partners, people you can talk to about your story. So whether this is like, I have my writing friends on Discord, or a literal romantic partner, or a friend, or a family member, but someone who you can like go to and say, I'm trying to figure out this thing, does it make sense? And I talk to my partner a lot, and he most of the time does not have much commentary about it, but just being able to talk to somebody as a sounding board, usually I'm able to figure it out myself, and it just helps. I don't know why, because if I was just saying it to myself out loud, I feel like it doesn't have the same impact, but trying to explain my thoughts to someone else and make it make sense, I think helps just work out some of those details. So yeah, have someone who you can talk to, who you can work through some of those plot outlining issues with, or like characterization issues, or see if dialogue makes sense, and have somebody who will hold you accountable, be like, yo, you written today? Or yeah, see, I'm just like the queen, I'm doing so good at linking things together, obviously, because number 5 is setting timers. So on Discord, you can sprint with people, and I have found this invaluable. You don't have to sprint with somebody else, but if you have an accountability partner, you can, and that will help. And sometimes when someone goes, it's almost like actually sprinting at the gym, or like not sprinting at the gym, but going to the gym, you're like, oh, this person's gonna go work out, I guess I'll be a gym buddy. You know, it's kind of the same mentality of, maybe I don't feel like writing today, but I guess if you're gonna like sprint on Discord or whatever, I guess I'll do it too. I'll just join. It's positive peer pressure, basically. But number 5 in that whole having timers sprinting thing, I used to have so much trouble. I would just stare at the blank page and be like, oh, I know kind of what I want to do, but I'm just overthinking it. And so that's, I think, something that we need to stop doing, is overthinking. If you have especially planned out an outline ahead of time, I just turn my brain off. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but it also links into another one, which is, I think, number 6. That's what we're at, right? Which is, don't get stuck in the details. A lot of times when you're writing, you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this thing, and I know it's gonna involve this thing, and then it all becomes like jumbled together, right? So I don't know if this is a sub point or another point, but I usually write down my like promises made, promises kept. If it's a big thing, I'll write it down as I'm writing, you know, or after I've finished sprinting. But sometimes when I'm editing, I'll go through and I'll like jot down on a separate document. I use Scrivener, but I'll jot down on a second document. These are things that I've kind of made little promises to the readers that have to be fulfilled and tied up at some point. So you can do that separately. While you're writing your first draft, it's gonna be a pile of, I don't want to curse. It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be not great, probably, because that's just how drafts are. So you don't have to get lost in every single detail and be thinking like, oh no, I'm gonna have to include all these things and I have to say this well. You don't. You really don't. Just get it all down, write it down. This is, I guess, maybe another point, maybe a sub point. I've lost track now. I used to write sporadically scenes just when they came to mind. This time I just tried to write linearly. I didn't let myself write out of that order, and if I had a really interesting piece of dialogue or something come to mind, I would write just that tiny snippet down, put it in a separate file in my Scrivener binder, and then leave it until that moment came. So it just helps, because I used to think that, you know, I'd be writing these things, I'm like, oh, it'll come up later, but then when you've changed things a little bit, or, you know, you've kind of discovered things along the way, then maybe that never comes, you know? And again, I feel like I lost count on my numbers, so this is just going to be a bunch of random tips, I guess, now, because I don't know. So number 6 was don't get stuck in the details. Number 7 is do get stuck to goals. Or is this number, this might be number 8. Numbers are hard, I don't know. Number 8, we'll just say, is do get stuck to your goals, because you can't just write when you're feeling inspired. You have to just make it a habit. That's what the sprinting helps. That's what the nano helps. NaNoWriMo and like Camp Nano, honestly, like, that's how I get so much of my stuff done, because I'm very competitive. So I treat it like I need to beat myself. I need to beat my own goals, and I need to beat the website. So there's all these stickers and stuff that you can earn when you like write every single day. And I'm like, I need to get it, because otherwise, like, you can't change it. You can't, it's not like a notebook you can erase things, or like an online calendar where you can exit out and like fix it and change your goals. You just got to do it. And if you don't, you can't go back and you know, redo. You just got to write every day. And so you can do that on things that aren't the Nano website, but you can also use Nano to write because it's not just camp. You can create your own goals whenever you want and do that. So I highly recommend it. Or there's like apps and stuff that you can use to keep track of that. So just make sure you're writing with intention, because it's not something that you can do when you're inspired only, because then you'll never get anything done. And it just helps to write in that linear way, which I think maybe is 9. I forget the numbers. I don't even know anymore. Because when you're writing in order, you can keep track of the story, and it feels more like a solid progression than this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's like, this happens because that happens. And then it's like, it feels like they say a boulder rolling down a hill when you're writing it in order. It sort of ties back into what I was saying at the beginning of all of this. Sometimes you learn about your characters as you go. This doesn't mean you should not plan ahead, because like I said, you want to have those sorts of introspective moments and know who your characters are, where they came from, their backgrounds. Like, that's important stuff, but sometimes you learn weird facts about your characters and you can fix it later on, because writing is kind of like sculpting, because you have sort of this big thing, right? And then you're making it slowly into a more defined thing, and you don't have to do that all at once. So I would say that drafting your book, that's when you have the clay. You have a block of clay. So drafting is when you have, this is not sponsored, when you have a block of clay. When you're outlining, you don't even got this, baby. You have, like, maybe you're on Amazon. Sorry, I don't like Jeff Bezos, but you know, maybe you're on Amazon or at a craft store and you're purchasing the clay. That's the outline. Then you got the draft. You have a block of clay, and then it's from there that you're actually making it into something, right? You're creating it very slowly. You're going from big to small until it's very refined. So I think we need to stop feeling like everything needs to be perfect, or like we need to have all the details figured out right away in characterization, in setting. When I'm writing, I almost write nothing about the setting. I will make that something more fine-tuned later on. I'll write like where we are, and but I mean like the details, I don't have things about the smells in the market or like the sounds of the wind or whatever. Like, I don't have those sorts of things when I'm drafting. I just want big picture story. And then I go through later and I'll add in all those things and make it sound pretty and make it sound like something someone would actually want to read. So I think we just get overwhelmed because this is a really overwhelming process. But if we look at it in little bits at a time and we don't focus on the tiny things when we should be focusing on the big things, I find that that's usually a better way to write. So I don't know if any of those things are helpful. I hope that they are. April was just a wild month. I had no intention of writing anything, and then I wrote 80,000 words in 30 days and then 100,000 words overall in 6 weeks. So that's wild to me, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to get this book in the editing process starting, what's today, the 3rd when I'm filming this, in a couple days. I just needed to take a step back because it's a lot. Alright, so I think I'm going to call it there on this video. I hope that those things were helpful. If not, thanks for sticking around anyway. I do videos on this channel. I just have a bunch that I filmed. I think the first one should hopefully be out by the time I put this one out, at least, talking about first lines in books and criticizing, ones that we've seen in media, and also some that were sent to me. So if you have any first lines that you've written in your stories that you would like me to look at, I have a link down in my description box. It's called First Line Submissions, I think, and I will analyze those through the lens of a thing that I created, which is called the five first line lessons of literary lust. Try saying that 5 times fast. So we'll look at that. I've got a book review coming up very soon about the Legendborn, 2 books that are out of the trilogy so far. Another one that I'm hoping to film at some point about The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because in filming the first video for my first lines, I learned that I don't like that book. I have very, very strong opinions about it, so if any of that sounds interesting to you, I do lots of writing things, lots of reading things, lots of other things, so follow like, subscribe, hit the bell. I'm at scarlet_Ansley on TikTok. All of my other information is in the description below, and if there's other stuff you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments. So thank you guys so much for being here, and until next time, sweet dreams!